Hi everyone. I've been lurking on this sub for years, but today, I finally have a story I need advice on. I'm 34, and my life has taken a bizarre turn recently. After reading countless posts about difficult sisters-in-law, I didn't think I'd ever be the one sharing. Yet here I am, unsure of how to handle a situation that feels like something straight out of a soap opera. Let me give you some context. My sister-in-law, Mia, is 27 years old and planning her wedding for this spring. For reasons beyond me, she's decided that the perfect venue for her dream wedding is my house. Yes, you read that right. My house. To be fair, my house is pretty nice. It's a 4-bedroom home with a big yard and a pool, perfect for an outdoor ceremony. Mia has grand plans, a garden wedding followed by a fancy dinner in the living room. It would be quite the event, except of course, I'm not even sure if I want it to happen here. That's why I'm turning to you all for advice. I've been married to my husband Jason for 8 years. We met in college, dated for a few years, and built a life together. Jason comes from humble beginnings. His dad was a day laborer and his mom worked various odd jobs to make ends meet. Despite that, Jason is hardworking and self-made, which is one of the many reasons I fell in love with him. Mia, his younger sister, is a different story. She's lived with my in-laws her entire life and doesn't work. She dropped out of college because she follows some influencer who preaches that you don't need a degree to succeed. While I have nothing against people who choose alternative paths, Mia doesn't seem to be pursuing anything. She has no job, no plans, and frankly no motivation. Meanwhile, my in-laws, bless their hearts, continue to indulge her every whim. They provide her with everything from food and shelter to extravagant luxuries they can't afford. It's frustrating to watch because Jason and I have worked hard for what we have. Back to the wedding. Mia approached me a few months ago to ask if she could use my house as the venue. She's engaged to Liam, an Irish guy whose family would be flying in for the occasion. My house, with its space and amenities, would be ideal for hosting both the ceremony and the guests. Here's the kicker. Mia doesn't have the money to rent a venue, and neither do my in-laws. If I don't agree, she's left with the courthouse option, which she clearly doesn't want. Jason, as much as I love him, has stayed neutral on this. He says it's my house and my decision to make. I wasn't sure what to do. On the one hand, I felt bad for her. Weddings are a big deal and I understood her desire to have something beautiful. But on the other hand, it's my house, my sanctuary. Allowing someone like Mia, who has no concept of boundaries, to take over felt risky. Growing up, my parents instilled a strong sense of independence in me. They were well off financially, but they didn't spoil me or my brother. When it came time for college, we were told to either earn scholarships or take out student loans. At the time, I resented it, but looking back, I'm grateful. It taught me responsibility and the value of hard work. My first job after college was a whirlwind. I spent my paycheck on vacations and nights out, thinking I'd finally made it. My dad, ever the pragmatist, pulled me aside and encouraged me to buy a house instead. He even helped with the down payment, but made it clear that the mortgage was my responsibility. Thanks to him, I own this home today. A spacious property that would be impossible to afford at current prices. Mia's upbringing was the polar opposite. Her parents coddled her, never pushing her to achieve anything. She thinks I'm jealous of her freedom because my parents abandoned me to fend for myself. That couldn't be further from the truth, but try explaining that to her. When Mia first asked to use my house, she practically begged. My in-laws joined in, pleading with me to spare them the expense of renting a venue. They even suggested they'd have to take out a loan if I didn't agree. I asked why Mia and Liam couldn't finance it themselves, especially since Liam seemed to have a good job. My in-laws insisted that traditionally, the bride's family covers the wedding costs, and Liam's family expected them to host. At this point I was torn. Should I let her use my house for the sake of family peace, or should I stand my ground and protect my space? I reluctantly agreed, thinking it would be a 2-day ordeal at most. Little did I know how much I'd regret that decision. I decided to let Mia use my house for her wedding, but not without some serious reservations. At the time I thought, it's just 2 days. How bad could it be? My husband Jason was supportive either way, but he made it clear it was my call. That's one of the things I love about him. He respects my decisions. However, Deep down, I had a feeling this wouldn't be as simple as I hoped. Spoiler alert, I was absolutely right. After I gave the green light, Mia wasted no time turning my house into her venue. She brought wedding planners over for a site visit while I was at work. I only found out because my doorbell camera pinged me, showing 2 men and Mia strolling through the house like it was a museum tour. I called her immediately. "Hey Mia, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Oh, just a site visit with the planners. Don't worry, they're professionals," she said breezily. "Okay, but I'd appreciate a heads up next time. And please be careful with my things," I replied. "Of course," she chirped before hanging up. That was my first taste of how this arrangement would play out. She saw my house as hers now, and any consideration for me or Jason was an afterthought, if that. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. I had cleared out 2 of the upstairs bedrooms for Mia's family, even hiring a cleaner to get everything spotless. Jason and I rearranged furniture to make space for the rented dining table Mia insisted on. She had specific demands for everything: where the lights should go, which plants to move, even what type of candles I should use for the ambiance. But then came the conversation that really set me off. One morning, Mia showed up unannounced while Jason and I were still in bed. She let herself in with the spare key I had reluctantly given her for wedding prep. By the time I got downstairs, she was inspecting the rooms we'd prepared. "Looks good," she said, nodding approvingly. "Mom and Dad will take the master bedroom, and I'll use the one with the walk-in closet." I blinked, confused. "Wait, where are Jason and I supposed to sleep?" She gave me a casual shrug. "I don't know. Can't you stay at a hotel or something? You both make good money, right?" I stared at her, trying to process the audacity. "Mia, this is my house. Why would we leave?" She rolled her eyes. "Well, it'd be weird for a married couple to stay here while my parents are pretending this is their house. It's just for a couple of days." Now, I'm not usually one to lose my temper, but this was too much. "Let me get this straight," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You want me to leave my own house so your in-laws can think it's your parents' home?" "Exactly," she said with a smile, completely oblivious to how insane she sounded. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. This isn't just about a wedding anymore. This is about her treating my home and me with zero respect. As if that wasn't bad enough, I soon learned the full extent of Mia's scheme. Not only had she told her fiancé Liam that this was her parents' house, but she had also let his family believe it. When I asked her how she planned to explain the family photos all over the walls, she shrugged and said, "We'll just take them down." "And what if they ask where Jason and I are?" I pressed. "Oh, I'll just say you're estranged from the family or something." "Don't worry, it'll be fine," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jason, who had been half asleep when I told him all this, finally woke up enough to grasp the situation. "Wait, she's kicking us out of our house for her wedding and telling people we don't exist?" he asked, his voice rising. "Pretty much," I said, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Jason shook his head. "This is too much. We need to talk to my parents." That evening, we went to Jason's parents' house to confront them. I thought surely they would see reason and talk some sense into Mia. But when we told them everything, their response floored me. "Well, we thought you were okay with it," his mom said weakly. "Okay with being excluded from a wedding at our own house?" Jason snapped. "Are you serious?" His dad chimed in, trying to mediate. "Maybe she could send you an invitation now?" I didn't even have words for that. Jason was furious. "You're missing the point. She lied to Liam's family, she's using our house without respect, and now she's excluding us? How is any of this okay?" His mom looked down, avoiding eye contact. "We just want to keep the peace. Mia's very sensitive." Jason let out a bitter laugh. "Well, you better figure out how to keep the peace when there's no wedding, because I'm this close to telling Liam's family the truth." That got their attention. His mom started panicking, begging us not to ruin Mia's special day. His dad tried to calm her down, saying they'd talk to Mia and get her to apologize. I wasn't holding my breath. By this point, I was done playing nice. Despite my reservations, I held off on making a final decision about the wedding. Jason's parents assured us they'd talk to Mia, and I wanted to believe they could knock some sense into her. But deep down, I knew better. Mia wasn't the type to listen to reason, and my in-laws had spent years enabling her. A couple of days later, Mia sent me a text that made my blood boil. "Hey, could you please remove all your family pictures from the hallway? Also, don't forget to move out the night before the wedding. My fiancé's family will arrive at 10 a.m. sharp, so make sure the house is spotless." She ended the message with a little heart emoji, as if that made her audacity any less infuriating. I showed the text to Jason, who just shook his head. "Unbelievable. She's acting like she owns the place." "No," I replied, my voice trembling with anger. "She's treating us like we don't exist. I'm done, Jason. I can't let this happen." Jason hesitated. "Look, I support whatever you decide, but if you cancel now, it'll cause a huge scene. My parents' reputation is on the line." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "What about our dignity, our home? Why are we bending over backward for someone who doesn't even respect us?" Jason sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're right. Let's call my parents one last time." That evening, Jason called his mom and dad to lay it all out. He told them Mia had officially crossed the line by demanding we leave the house and remove our personal belongings. His mom predictably tried to downplay it. "It's just for a couple of days. Can't you make this sacrifice for your sister?" Jason wasn't having it. "No, Mom, this isn't about sacrifice, it's about respect. She's lied to Liam's family, excluded us from the wedding, and now she's kicking us out of our own home. How is that okay?" His dad chimed in, trying to smooth things over. "Maybe she didn't mean it that way. Let me talk to her again." "No," I interrupted, finally finding my voice. "This isn't up for negotiation anymore. If Mia can't treat us with basic respect, there will be no wedding at my house. Period." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Jason's mom started to cry. "Please don't do this. Think of what people will say. Our reputation." Jason cut her off. "Mom, you should have thought about that before letting Mia run wild. This is her mess, not ours." He hung up before she could respond. After that call, I knew I had to take action. Mia still had a spare key, and I wasn't about to let her waltz into my house with her wedding planners and guests. So I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed. The next morning, bright and early, the wedding planners arrived. I greeted them at the door, keeping my expression neutral. "Hi, we're here to set up for the wedding," one of them said cheerfully. I shook my head. "Sorry, but there's been a change of plans." "The wedding isn't happening here?" They exchanged confused looks. "But Mia said—" I cut them off. "You'll have to take it up with her. This is my house and I'm not hosting a wedding." They left, clearly annoyed, but I didn't care. I knew the real fireworks were coming soon. Sure enough, an hour later, Liam showed up at my door. He looked confused and a little nervous. "Hi, I'm looking for Mia. Is she here?" he asked. "No, she's not," I replied calmly. "This isn't her house." He blinked. "What do you mean?" "She told me this was her parents' home." I smiled, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. "Liam, let me clear this up for you. This is my house. Jason and I live here. Mia and her parents live in a small apartment across town." Liam's face went pale. "Wait, what? But she said—" "I know what she said," I interrupted. "And I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But Mia has been lying to you and your family. She planned this entire wedding here without even asking for permission. And on top of that, she excluded us from the guest list." Liam looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He mumbled something about needing to make a call and walked away, his phone already in his hand. At around 9 a.m., Mia showed up, looking every bit the entitled princess she believed herself to be. She banged on the door like a madwoman, shouting my name. I opened the window and leaned out. "What do you want, Mia?" "What do I want? I want to know why you kicked out the wedding planners and ruined everything," she screamed. I shrugged. "Because this is my house and I don't feel like hosting your wedding. Simple as that." "You can't do this," she screeched. "My fiancé and his family are on their way." "Then you better tell them the truth," I said coolly. She launched into a tirade, calling me every name in the book. When the neighbors started peeking out of their windows, I warned her to leave or risk having the police called. That finally got through to her. She stormed off, muttering threats under her breath. When Jason got home later that day, I told him what had happened. He listened quietly, then nodded. "You did the right thing," he said. "She had this coming." He even called his dad to let him know the wedding was officially off. His dad tried to plead with him, but Jason held firm. "This isn't our problem anymore, Dad. You should have reined Mia in a long time ago." The morning of what was supposed to be Mia's big day, Jason and I sat in the kitchen sipping coffee, bracing ourselves for the inevitable fallout. It didn't take long for the chaos to reach our doorstep. Around 10 a.m., just as the guests were meant to start arriving, my phone started buzzing relentlessly. Calls, texts, voicemails. Mia was in full meltdown mode. Jason glanced at his phone, shaking his head. "She's blowing up my phone too. I'm not answering." "Good," I said. "Let her deal with the mess she created." Just as I said that, the doorbell rang. We exchanged a look. "You get it," Jason said with a sigh. I opened the door to find Mia's parents standing there looking harried. My mother-in-law looked like she'd been crying, and my father-in-law had the kind of pinched expression that comes from years of trying to keep the peace. "Can we talk?" my father-in-law asked hesitantly. "About what?" I said, crossing my arms. "About salvaging the wedding," he said. I stepped aside, letting them in, but I wasn't about to make this easy for them. Once they were seated, my mother-in-law started pleading with me. "Please, we know Mia made some mistakes, but she's under a lot of stress. She didn't mean to upset you." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't mean to upset me?" She lied to her fiancé, excluded us from the wedding, and told us to leave our own home. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of entitlement. Jason nodded. "Mom, Dad, you've let her get away with this behavior her whole life. Maybe it's time she faced some consequences." "But the wedding is today," my mother-in-law wailed. "What are we supposed to tell the guests? What will people think?" Jason leaned forward, his tone calm but firm. "You should have thought about that when Mia decided to treat us like doormats. This isn't our responsibility." His dad tried a different approach. "What if she apologizes? Would you reconsider?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Apologize? She's been calling me names all morning and blaming me for ruining her life. Forgive me if I don't think she's sincere." At that moment, Mia herself stormed through the door, having apparently followed her parents. Her face was red, her makeup smeared, and her voice was shrill as she started yelling. "You selfish witch!" she screamed at me. "You've ruined everything. Liam's family is furious, and he's not even answering my calls. Do you realize what you've done?" I stared at her, unimpressed. "I protected my home and my dignity. Maybe you should try it sometime." Just as Mia was about to launch into another tirade, there was a knock at the door. Jason opened it to reveal Liam. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Mia, can we talk?" he said, his voice tight. "Of course," she said, brightening up like she thought he was there to comfort her. But Liam wasn't here to comfort anyone. He turned to Jason and me. "First, I need to apologize to both of you. I had no idea this wasn't Mia's house. She lied to me and my family, and I'm sorry for any inconvenience we caused." Jason and I exchanged a glance. I could see he appreciated the sincerity in Liam's tone. "It's not your fault," I said. "I'm just sorry you had to find out like this." Mia's face crumpled. "Liam, what are you saying? It's just a misunderstanding." He shook his head. "No, Mia, this is more than a misunderstanding. You lied to me about something fundamental. How am I supposed to trust you after this?" "Trust me? You're breaking up with me over a house," she screeched. "It's not just the house, Mia," he said. "It's the lies, the entitlement, and the way you treat people. I've ignored the red flags for too long, but this is the last straw." Liam walked out, leaving Mia standing there in stunned silence. She turned back to us, her face twisted with rage. "This is all your fault," she screamed at me. "Actually, Mia," I said calmly, "this is your fault. You lied to Liam, manipulated your parents, and disrespected us. If you want someone to blame, look in the mirror." She stormed out without another word, slamming the door behind her. By the time the afternoon rolled around, word had spread among the guests that the wedding was off. Jason's parents tried to do damage control, calling people to apologize and cancel the arrangements. The neighbors, meanwhile, were buzzing with gossip about the morning's drama. Jason and I spent the rest of the day in quiet relief. For the first time in weeks, the house was peaceful again. "Do you think she'll try to come back?" Jason asked that evening. "If she does, she'll find the locks changed," I said with a small smile. A week has passed since the fiasco that was supposed to be Mia's wedding. To say it's been eventful would be an understatement. The fallout has been a mix of chaos, relief, and plenty of unanswered calls from Jason's parents. But one thing has become crystal clear. I made the right decision, and I have no regrets. After Liam walked out on her, Mia went into full-blown meltdown mode. She's been crying non-stop, according to Jason's parents, and blaming me for ruining her life. She even showed up at our house one morning, screaming and banging on the door. I didn't even bother answering. Instead, I called the police. By the time they arrived, Mia had already fled, but not before causing a scene loud enough for half the neighborhood to witness. One of my neighbors later told me they heard her yelling something about me being a selfish witch who destroyed her future. If that's what she truly believes, then so be it. I'm done trying to explain myself to someone who refuses to take responsibility for her actions. Jason's parents haven't handled the situation much better. They've called him repeatedly, trying to guilt-trip him into fixing things with Mia. His mother in particular seems desperate to salvage some semblance of peace in the family. "She's your sister," his mom sobbed on the phone one evening. "How can you just abandon her like this?" Jason was calm but firm. "Mom, Mia lied to everyone, disrespected us, and tried to kick us out of our own home. This is the consequence of her actions. I'm not abandoning her. I'm holding her accountable." Eventually, he had to block their numbers because the calls became too much. For the first time in our marriage, I saw Jason truly stand up to his family, and it made me love him even more. A few days after the non-wedding, Liam came by the house. I was surprised to see him, but invited him in for a cup of coffee. "I just wanted to thank you," he said, looking genuinely remorseful. "If you hadn't stopped the wedding, I don't know how much longer I would have let myself be blind to Mia's lies." I shook my head. "I didn't do it for you, but I'm glad you see the truth now. You deserve someone who's honest with you." He nodded, staring into his coffee. "It's just embarrassing, you know? Introducing her to my family, planning a future together, only to find out it was all built on lies." "You're not the one who should feel embarrassed," I said gently. "This isn't your fault." We talked for a while longer, and by the time he left, he seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. In the days that followed, Jason and I settled back into our routine. The house felt like ours again. No more wedding planners, no more drama, just peace. I've started redecorating the rooms I had cleared out, turning one into a cozy reading nook and the other into a guest room for people who actually respect us. Jason. And I have also talked about setting boundaries with his family moving forward. While we're open to repairing the relationship with his parents someday, we've agreed that it will only happen if they stop enabling Mia's behavior. As for Mia, I've heard through the grapevine that she's still trying to spin the situation to save face. According to her, the wedding was canceled because Liam got cold feet, not because of her lies. I guess some people never learn. This whole experience has taught me a lot. For one, I've learned the importance of standing up for myself, even when it's uncomfortable. Saying no to Mia and her ridiculous demands wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I've also learned that boundaries are crucial, especially with family. Just because someone is related to you doesn't mean they have the right to walk all over you. Respect is a two-way street, and if someone refuses to meet you halfway, it's okay to let them go. At the end of the day, I'm grateful for the life Jason and I have built together. Our home is our sanctuary, and no one, not even Mia, gets to take that away from us. Story 2. The headline of this story is, "Daughter Testified. I was unsuitable to give my ex full custody since I was not a good parent. She's back now. My ex-wife, a 45-year-old woman, and I, a 46-year-old man, were divorced 3 years ago after she ejected her. We had 3 children together, 22 women, 17 women, and 24 men. This year, we only had custody and child support for our youngest daughter, Mary, who was 14 when we separated, because our 2 older children had already moved out and were attending college. I pushed for joint parenting, but my ex wanted complete custody. At this point, I had moved into an apartment, and Mary would spend the week with her mother since it was more convenient for school. On weekends, she would stay with me, and while I would respond to Mary's inquiries on our divorce, I was careful to avoid saying anything unfavorable. I didn't want Mary to believe that our divorce was due to anything she had done. I treasure the time we had together on the weekends. From what I could see, Mary too seemed to enjoy our time together. The court hearing followed, and to be honest, I assumed everything would be well when I entered the courts that day. Although I didn't anticipate it being simple, I had persuaded myself that Mary wouldn't make matters more difficult than they were. Even though things between Sarah and me were falling apart, I had tried my hardest to be a decent father. I never mentioned her mother negatively, kept things amicable, and attended every weekend. I assumed that was significant, but I sensed a change in the atmosphere as soon as Mary stood up to talk. She appeared far more assured than a 14-year-old should have in that circumstance as she stood there, holding her brief statement. Then she began to read. It was more than simply her words. She stated it that way. Her words had a harsh tone, as if she were attempting to harm me. She claimed that I didn't care about her, that I wasn't a good father, and that my goal in vying for custody was to harm her mother. She even accused me of being self-centered and not putting her needs first. My lawyer gave me a look that practically shouted, "What the hell is happening?" while I sat there in shock. Hearing those remarks from my own daughter, it was like being punched in the stomach. The manner she spoke made it impossible for me to grasp where it was coming from. I was there. Even though you would have thought I was some jerk who didn't care or show up, I was there all the time, even when I thought Sarah was attempting to push me away from Mary's life. But the words continued to flow. She talked about how she didn't feel secure around me, that she didn't want to be in my apartment, and that the only place she felt safe was at her mother's house. She also included some strange, inflated claims about how tiny and gloomy my place was. It seemed unbelievable to me. I had put a lot of effort into making her feel at home there. Here she was dismantling it as if it were a joke. The entire time, with a smug little smirk, Sarah sat there. She didn't have to speak, but she chose not to. For her, Mary was causing all the harm. I really wanted to say something. I wanted to correct Mary and interrupt her, to bring back memories of our enjoyable days together. Every weekend I'd tried to keep her feeling normal in spite of everything. However, I was unable to. All I could do was sit there and accept it. By the time Mary was done, my hands were trembling from the pain of it all, not from rage. How could my young girl, my own daughter, say such things about me? Did she think they were real? Or was Sarah the only one who had an impact? I couldn't decide which stung more. The fact that she could actually despise me, or the idea that Sarah had also persuaded her. I made an effort to speak with her after the hearing. I refused to debate or shout. All I wanted to do was comprehend. I shouted her name, followed her out into the hallway and asked, "Mary, could we please have a little conversation?" She continued without pausing. "There's nothing to discuss," she remarked, casting a sidelong glance before leaving with Sarah. Naturally, after turning around and giving me this icy, satisfied glance, Sarah told me to leave them alone. The sense of emptiness I had at that time is beyond words. Mary's refusal to speak wasn't the only reason. It was the knowledge that she might not want to do it ever again. That night, I drove home in quiet while mentally reliving the entire incident. It felt like a knife every time she spoke. Unsuitable, selfish, not safe. It was all illogical. I couldn't defend myself, though, without making everything worse. I wondered where I went wrong over the following few days. Was there anything I didn't do during the marriage? Was it my responsibility for leaving Sarah to manage the weekdays after I moved out? Or was Mary being poisoned by Sarah against me? Whichever option it was, it made no difference. They were all awful. Everything changed after that day. I felt certain that I had lost something significant, and I doubted that I would ever retrieve it. However, the defeat itself wasn't the hardest part. It had to do with Mary's seeming lack of concern. Things changed after the custody hearing. I'm not even sure how to describe it. It wasn't as though Mary and I had a major dispute or decided to call it quits. However, she stopped responding to my texts after that day. When I tried to check in through Sarah, I would either receive evasive answers or, more frequently, nothing, and she would not answer the phone. I used to really look forward to the weekends. They simply vanished. No justification. No, I'm not interested in visiting. Nothing. On Friday nights, I would wait for her to arrive at my apartment, hoping that she would change her mind. But she never did. She was probably simply irritated or furious and needed some time, I told myself at first. However, it became evident that she was done with me as the weeks stretched into months. I didn't want to push her. I believed that she would ultimately change her mind if I gave her some space. Thus, I continued to text her. Simple stuff. I hope all is okay with you. I hope you do well on this week's test. Kiddo, I miss you, such things. I received no answer at all, not even a thank you. I would sometimes hear from Emma or Josh. They would tell me tidbits about Mary, like how she was doing in school and if she had made the cheer squad. Although it wasn't much, at least they seemed to know as little as I did about the reason she had interrupted me. They both denied that Mary had mentioned me to them when I inquired. She simply didn't mention me at all. Emma phoned me one day. Mary had talked about feeling abandoned throughout the divorce, she added. I was absolutely unprepared for that. I put up a fierce fight for joint custody. I was the one attempting to keep us in touch, so how could she believe that I had abandoned her? After that, I made another attempt to get in touch. I texted her more, letting her know how much I missed her and apologizing if she ever felt abandoned. I assured her that no matter what, I would always be available if she wanted to chat. You know what I have too? Nothing. At one point, Sarah ceased even trying to keep me informed, as if I didn't exist. Anytime I wanted to inquire about Mary, her academic performance, her emotional state, or anything else, Sarah would just stop talking to me. She would claim she's all right, as if that was sufficient enough. It came to the point where my only relationship with Mary was the college fund I continued to contribute to, and the child support I gave each month. But I didn't stop. Even if she detested me, I was determined to fulfill my role as her father. But it wasn't all awful. I began dating Lisa at this time. She had 3 children of her own and was a single mother. In all honesty, she was the first significant positive influence in my life following the divorce. Lisa recognized the struggles I was facing. She had to deal with the mess her ex had created. Her children were wonderful, and I felt somewhat stable for the first time in a long time. But even with Lisa in my life, I was unable to replace the Mary-shaped void. I felt like I had failed every time I saw her photo on social media or heard about her from Emma or Josh. What might I have done differently? I kept asking myself, how can I resolve this? I couldn't solve it, that's the problem. Not alone, anyhow. Mary had decided I was not wanted in her life. Furthermore, I had no idea how to alter it without making matters worse, so I floated. I looked at Lisa, her children, my work. I promised myself that I would be prepared if Mary decided to get back in touch. I simply had to accept this as my reality till then. A father hoping for a connection that may never return without his daughter. 3 years had passed since the custody court, and I had come to terms with the fact that Mary and I had essentially lost contact. It didn't make me happy, but what could I do? I wasn't going to push my way into her life since she didn't want me there. At last, everything were beginning to return to normal. I was living with Lisa, and her children were wonderful. Being around them made things feel a bit less empty, but they couldn't take the place of my own children. For the first time in a long time, I was pleased, and Lisa and I were doing well. Then, one night, I received a call from Mary that came out of nowhere. For a moment, I looked at my phone, quite incredulous. It was more than a year since I last heard her voice. I was tempted to leave it on voicemail. What on earth could she want now? Naturally, though, I picked up Dad. I could see right away that she had been sobbing when she said it. It sounded as like she was straining to keep her words together, but it was failing. What's the matter? With a knot in my gut already, I asked. She spoke quickly at first, as if she was unsure of how much time she had left to explain. I was booted out by Mom. There's nowhere for me to go. I had no idea who else I should call. Then hearing her admit that I had been the last person she wanted to speak to after everything had been tearing me up inside for so long. And now she was calling me when she had nowhere else to go. I couldn't decide if I should be relieved or devastated. You can, of course. I instructed her to come here. All right, we'll work it out. Lisa, who was seated next to me on the couch, looked at me, half worried, half perplexed. It's Mary, I mouthed, and without a word she nodded. Mary looked different when she arrived at the house. Not only was she older, but she also appeared exhausted, as if she had been carrying a lot of weight for some time. I was surprised when she walked in and gave me a hug. This girl was holding me as if her life depended on it, even though she hadn't wanted to text me back. I didn't immediately press her for specifics. When she was ready, I assumed she would let me know. Indeed, she became a little more forthcoming later that evening. I got into a quarrel with Mom. Having a mug of tea, she sat at the kitchen table and spoke. She was Lisa's creation. She said that she could no longer handle me. I was angry on the inside, but I attempted to maintain a neutral expression. Sarah throwing her out like that seemed unbelievable to me. What took place? Gently, I inquired. Mary paused, staring at the table below. While she was out of town, I hosted a party. Things became unmanageable, a few things broke. I didn't press, even though I couldn't reveal the entire tale. What about her other statements? I asked thoughtfully. Mary let out a sigh and lowered her shoulders. I don't have a drug issue, despite her belief. I've sometimes used marijuana, but not in a serious way. Though I wasn't certain this was a side of Mary, I still wanted to trust her. I had no idea what it was, and I had no idea how to go around it. I remained up talking to Lisa after she went to bed. How will you respond? Lisa inquired. I'm not sure. I acknowledged she could be here for the time being, but I'm not sure about the long run. Lisa had an anxious expression. I would like to assist, but we must consider the children. She is unknown to them, and whether her mother's statements are accurate. I understood her meaning even if she didn't finish the phrase. Mary and I were no longer the only ones involved. It was impossible for me to make a decision without taking into account my entire new family. I spent hours that night lying awake and gazing at the ceiling. Mary was back in my life for the first time in years, and all I could think about was how utterly unprepared I felt. I wanted to help her, but I didn't know how to go about doing that. I just knew that the days ahead would be among the most difficult I had ever experienced. Mary had slept in a little by the next morning, so I made the decision to find out more information about what had transpired. I needed to hear the whole story if I was going to figure out how to help her, but it wasn't like I wanted to question her or anything. As she sat down for breakfast at the kitchen table, I remarked, "Hey, Mary." It was only the two of us because Lisa had already dropped her children off at school. Could you elaborate on what transpired with your mother? I don't want to press the issue. Before responding, she steered clear of my gaze and stirred her cereal for much too long. Dad, I told you, I hosted a party. Mom was alarmed when several things shattered. All right, I said cautiously, attempting to maintain a neutral tone. However, your mother doesn't just dismiss you because of a party. There must be more involved. Mary shoved her dish aside with a loud groan. For months she has been pursuing me over trivial matters. My friends, my grades, everything. I suppose the party was the final straw. I knew she wasn't telling me everything, but I didn't want to press too hard and force her to stop talking altogether. I made the decision to give Sarah a call and hear her version of events instead. It was not a nice call. Sarah immediately went into her typical patronizing tone as soon as she picked up the phone. You want to get involved now then? When she was plummeting, where were you? Again, I spiraled. What are you discussing? Sarah continued by telling me that Mary had been observed to be hanging out with a bad crowd, skipping school, and failing grades. The party wasn't just some minor thing, she said. It had been a complete catastrophe. A number of pricey goods were either taken or shattered, and the house was completely destroyed. Sarah went on, and let's not even talk about the drugs. Weeks ago, I discovered marijuana in her room, and I have a good feeling she uses more. I felt sick to my stomach after hearing all of this. Was Sarah exaggerating? Or was Mary truly that far gone? When I hung up the phone, I knew she wasn't exactly known for being composed. I returned to Mary, who was on the couch, browsing through her phone. I spoke with your mother. Sitting across from her, I said. She squinted. You did, of course. You've been missing school and failing your classes, Mary, she continued. Is that accurate? She shrugged, avoiding eye contact. All right, school has been difficult. I've been rather busy. What about the weed? I inquired. There was a response to it. Her expression was defensive as she sat up more erect. Dad, it's not a huge thing. It's only marijuana. Everybody smokes it. I leaned forward and tried not to speak too loudly. Mary, I'm not here to pass judgment. All I have to do to assist you is to comprehend what is happening. She scowled at me while crossing her arms. Assist me, as if you've been my helper for 3 years. Yes, all right, it hurt. However, I ignored it. Your mother believes that you have a drug problem. Do I need to know anything else? Mary gave an eye roll. As usual, she is exaggerating. I hosted a party. She's behaving like I'm a criminal now because it went out of control. I was unsure about what to believe. Sarah wasn't the most trustworthy storyteller to start. Mary's defensiveness, however, didn't exactly exude innocence. After the kids went to bed that night, Lisa and I had a lengthy conversation. It's just marijuana, she adds. Sarah is certain it's more, but I told her. Lisa had an anxious expression. And you think she's real? I said, I don't know. Mary isn't really providing me with much. Lisa let out a sigh. Look, I'm sorry for her, but we must consider the children. It might not be the greatest idea to have Sarah here if what she's saying is accurate. I gave a nod. It felt awful to turn Mary away after she had finally come to me for help, even if it made me feel nauseous. But Lisa was right. The last thing I wanted was to cause trouble for her children, who didn't even know Mary. In all honesty, I felt totally stuck. Mary needed assistance, genuine assistance. However, I wasn't sure if I could offer it to her. I also began to question whether I was in over my head because of Lisa's worries. I felt it was time to call the next day. Mary remained at the residence, pretend that nothing was amiss. Unless she needed anything, she hardly spoke to Lisa or myself and spent much of her time on her phone. There was a lot of tension in the house. I could see Lisa was worried, even though she was attempting to make things normal for her children. Lisa and I sat down in the kitchen after the children had gone to bed. With a stern yet hushed voice, Lisa stated, "We need to decide what we're doing here. I'd want to assist her. I do. However, she cannot just remain here forever." I looked at the table and nodded. All day I had been imagining many situations, and none of them seemed correct. "Yeah," I said, "but I'm not sure where else she should go. She's Lisa, my daughter. How can I simply inform her?" "No," Lisa rubbed her temples and moaned. "I truly understand. However, you must consider the implications for the rest of us. She is 17 years old and clearly going through a difficult time. What type of impact she may have on the children worries me." She was not mistaken. Even though it was painful to acknowledge that I was now responsible for Lisa's children, none of this was requested by them. Furthermore, I couldn't take the chance of them being involved in Mary's troubles. "I will speak with her." Finally, I said. "It won't be simple, though." I knocked on Mary's door that evening. When I walked in, she was lying on the bed, hardly looking up as she browsed through her phone. "What?" Her tone was dismissive and icy as she inquired. "We must speak, Mary." I sat down on the desk chair and stated that. She crossed her arms, sat up and rolled her eyes. "I'll guess. Are you going to lecture me now because Mom phoned you again?" "No," I answered, attempting to maintain a calm tone. "It's not about your mother. It's about the following step." Her face stiffened instantly. "What is the intended meaning of that?" I inhaled deeply because I could already feel the weight of what I was going to say. "You can't remain here forever, Mary. That's not how this house is put up. Furthermore, I don't think it's the ideal setting for you given all that's going on." She just gazed at me for a moment, her mouth hanging wide. Then the rage struck. "Are you serious?" She lost her temper. "You promised to assist me. You're my father. Are you just going to eject me once more? I'm not going to toss you out," I said, attempting to seem calm. "This isn't the ideal location for you right now, but I still want to assist. We can investigate alternative possibilities. Perhaps you might get the help you require through therapy or a program." "God," she interrupted me as I was getting up. "You don't understand, do you? I don't require some dumb software. All I need is somewhere to stay, and you're not even able to help me with that." "Mary," I murmured, getting to my feet. "It isn't that easy. In this house, there are other people to think about." She threw her hands in the air and interrupted. "Of course. Your new ideal family. I suppose I don't belong there. Even though what she said hurt, I couldn't allow her to pressure me into choosing a course of action I wasn't convinced was correct. It's unfair." Silently, I said, "For years I've tried to get in touch with you, but you've always turned me down. I'm meant to immediately abandon everything now that you've appeared out of nowhere?" She gave a head shake. Her eyes began to well up with tears. "You don't understand. You never understood. I didn't have anybody else, so I phoned you. I can now see why." She slammed the door behind her as she ran out of the room. Without a word, she packed her things and departed the following morning. Before she left, I made an effort to speak with her, but she dismissed me as the door shut. I had a debilitating feeling of failure. I felt that my efforts to act in her best interests, Lisa's best interests, and everyone else's best interests were insufficient. One of the most difficult things I've ever had to do was watch her go, but I couldn't think of anything else to do. I'm now unsure if I made the proper decision. Did I fail my daughter when she most needed me, or did I merely protect my family? The house felt different when Mary departed, less noisy, heavier. Lisa seemed a little strange, even though she had been the one most worried about her staying. Although she made an effort to persuade me that I had made the correct decision, I didn't feel that way. How was that possible? I let my daughter go out the door after she had approached me for assistance. The initial days following her departure. I kept playing the discussion over and over in my mind. Her voice kept coming to me. You don't understand. You never understood. Perhaps she was correct. Perhaps I hadn't made an effort to comprehend her situation. I called Sarah in the hopes that she would provide me with news on Mary's whereabouts, but my calls were not returned. No response to the texts. No voicemails. Emma and Josh were as clueless as I was. Josh claimed that Mary was also not answering him. Emma also informed me that she will speak when she was ready. Dad, all you can do is wait. Hold on. I had spent years doing just that, awaiting the arrival of Mary, awaiting her to reveal herself. I'm waiting for her to allow me to be her father once more. I had sent her away when she finally turned to face me. I was unable to get rid of the guilt. I poured myself into my work and Lisa's and her children's company. I'm trying to divert my attention. However, I did what I did. I thought about Mary all the time, when the home was peaceful at night. Sitting in the living room, I would ponder her whereabouts, activities, and general well-being. I couldn't stop thinking about how our relationship had deteriorated over the past few years and all the opportunities that had been lost to mend it. Perhaps this wouldn't have occurred if I had pushed back more forcefully. Perhaps Mary wouldn't have strayed so far away if I had pushed harder for joint custody or denied Sarah such power. However, it might not make a difference. Simply sounds. A few weeks after that, Josh texted me. Dad, hello, Mary told me. She is back at her mother's, refuses to discuss what transpired. Although knowing where she was a comfort, it didn't much improve my mood. She was once again in the exact predicament that had prompted her to call me. What if it simply occurred once more? I attempted to text her, just something easy. Mary, hello, I'm relieved you're secure. Tell me if you need anything, please. I'm here all the time. No answer. Even Lisa found it difficult to find the perfect words to console me. You can't beat yourself up forever, she said one evening after the children had gone to bed. You made an effort to assist her, but you also needed to consider everyone's interests. I am aware. Gazing at the floor, I said, she is still my child, though. I ought to have done more. Lisa took a seat next me. A cup that is empty cannot be used to pour. You've been exerting every effort, and Mary must eventually take you to the next level. Though it didn't feel that way, it sounded plausible. You are expected to be there at all times as a parent. However, I had transported her back to the location that had caused her pain when she most needed me. After several months, everything began to return to normal. Despite never receiving a response, I continued to text Mary sometimes. Josh and Emma came more frequently, but they would either shift the topic or shrug as if they were at a loss for words when I inquired about Mary. I've pondered what I could have done differently for a long time. Should I have put up more of a fight to keep her at home? Was it right of me to disregard Lisa's worries and concentrate only on Mary? Or would that have ultimately done even more harm? To be honest, I have no idea. I might never find out. Right now, all I can do is keep trying, keep contacting people, keep showing up, and hold out hope that Mary will eventually allow me to return to her life. I'm caught in this limbo till then, regretting the past, uncertain about the future, and wishing I had acted differently at the time. Story 3. According to the title of this narrative, my mother has always given preference to my brother, but taking my fortune for him was the final straw. Before we begin the video, guys, I just noticed something strange. Currently, 82% of you are not subscribers. Why don't you click the subscribe button if you're already here and like the content? It's totally free. It only takes a moment, and it greatly contributes to the channel's growth, allowing me to continue sharing tales you enjoy. Let quote S begin the video now. OP begins by stating that it was difficult to ignore Michael's status as Mom's favorite whilst growing up. She believed he couldn't do anything wrong because he was 4 years older than me. She would manipulate the circumstances such that I was held accountable if he got into problems. In retrospect, I believe it began when I was very little, perhaps 6 years old. Michael decided he wanted to use the swing I was on one day at the park. When I told him to wait his turn, he pushed me away instead. I shattered my arm when I landed incorrectly. That day, I sobbed uncontrollably, not only because it hurt, but also because of Mom's reaction. She reprimanded me rather than Michael. She replied that since he was older and naive, I should have just let him to use the swing. Why am I the one in trouble? I recall wondering as I sat there with my arm held. That encapsulated my early years. The story didn't end there. Michael had a tendency to go through my belongings. Mom would dismiss my complaints when he took money from my piggy bank whenever he felt like it. He needs it more than you do, she would remark. You're not old enough to comprehend. I would put money aside for small purchases for weeks or even months. I want a new toy, things like art materials. And Michael wouldn't think twice about taking the money. He once bought chocolates with it. Additionally, he once used money to purchase a cheap video game from a friend. Mom. Answer. She didn't even apologize or force him to return it. Instead, she purchased him a new game to lift his spirits because he was upset at his father's yelling. The only person who ever made an attempt to hold Michael responsible was Dad, but his attempts were never successful. Every time, Mom would intervene and explain that Michael was simply misunderstood or going through a phase. Dad was always so protective of me when he was around, and I believe that's why. He could tell that I was being treated unfairly. But after Dad passed away, everything was different. Michael was 16 and I was 12. On his way home from work, he died in a vehicle accident. The roads were slick and it was raining. Other than my mother sobbing in the kitchen when the police arrived to inform us, I don't recall much of that evening. Our entire world seemed to have fallen apart at first. Michael, however, seemed to take over my mother's life while I was mourning the death of my father. The initial weeks following Dad's passing were a haze. It was difficult for me to stay up with academics. Mom would be sobbing while sitting on the couch with one of Dad's shirts when I got home. I first believed that perhaps our common sadness might help us connect. However, each time I attempted to discuss my feelings with her, she would shift the conversation to Michael. She would advise you to be strong for your brother since Michael is going through a really difficult moment. She adopted that as her motto, have courage for Michael. The fact that I was only a child didn't matter either. I was supposed to take the initiative. All of a sudden, I had to make sure Michael had everything he needed, cook dinner, and clean the house. While I waited in the background trying to understand my place in this new family, Mom would spend hours consoling him and talking to him. I heard her on the phone with a buddy one evening. Michael needs me more than anyone else right now, she stated. This is really difficult for him, and he is really sensitive. I have a different name. She is more powerful. She probably had no idea how much that upset me. I lacked strength. I was a fearful, distraught child who had recently lost her father. Mom, however, believed that Michael's sentiments were more important than mine. The partiality only grew worse over the years. Shortly after his father's death, Michael began to act out. He would argue, skip class, and retort to professors. He was once found peddling cigarettes to younger pupils. Mom excused him instead of disciplining him. She said that the school didn't comprehend him and that his behavior was a result of his sadness. Mom pulled him out and enrolled him in another school after they threatened to punish him, saying the previous one wasn't difficult enough for him. It was absurd. I put myself into school in the interim. To save money for college, I joined groups, put a lot of effort into getting high grades, and even started working a part-time job when I was 15. However, I was never able to gain Mom's attention, no matter what I did. Michael had detention that day, so she was unable to attend my honor roll event. Michael needed help with his schoolwork, so she was unable to attend my first argument tournament. The trend was obvious. Michael was always the first. I wasn't only angry at Michael, I also hated my mother. He understood how to take advantage of her spoiling him, even if it wasn't his fault. Anything would get him away with it. He was aware that I couldn't. I once spent weeks working on a scientific assignment, and the night before it was due, Michael destroyed everything. Due to the fact that he lost a school competition, I was enraged. Mom, however, had me apologize to him after I informed her, saying that I ought to have been more sympathetic because Michael was unhappy. To cheer him up, she then brought him to the mall and got him a new video game. By high school, I had given up on expecting anything from my mother. I was aware that she would not attend my functions or commemorate my accomplishments. I turned my attention inside and began to fantasize about leaving that house. My goals were to attend college, land a decent career, and start a life free of Michael's turmoil. However, I couldn't help but feel the burden of my mother's neglect, even as I made plans to go. Her preference for Michael over me eroded my self-esteem each time. I began to question whether I was as insignificant as she made me seem. Now, as I look back, I see how much those dynamics influenced who I am. I grew up feeling like I had to prove myself all the time, even when no one was looking. That's understandable. Things started to become worse by the time Michael was 17. Small acts of defiance were no longer the extent of his phases. They were blatantly damaging. He began drinking, missing school more frequently, and getting into arguments with people who didn't agree with him. Mom, however, stepped up her defenses of him rather than confronting him. She would argue that you don't understand what he's going through, or that he's simply acting out because of your dad. It was difficult to observe. Mom was always there to clean up after Michael's mishaps. She had marched down to the principal's office to protect him if he got into a fight at school. She would accuse them of being unjust if a teacher phoned to discuss his behavior. No matter how awful it got, it didn't matter. She constantly found someone else to place the blame on. I remained invisible in the interim, attempting to keep out of the line of fire. I assumed that Mom would finally snap when Michael smashed her car while intoxicated. After spending the entire night drinking with his pals, he managed to persuade one of them to let him drive home. He ultimately wrapped the vehicle around a tree. He escaped with only minor injuries, which was a miracle, but fortunately, no one else was harmed. The cops arrived to our residence the next morning. I saw his mother promise to take care of it, then talk her way out of it. She instructed me to keep out of it and hired a lawyer to lower Michael's charges. Later, when I inquired about her financial situation, I learned that she had taken out a loan to pay for the legal bills. It was quite annoying. Michael didn't even offer an apology. He pretended it didn't matter. Mom also allowed him to get away with it. Michael had another DUI a few months later. Mom refinanced the house this time in order to hire a better attorney. I recall hearing her pleading with the bank for an extension over the phone. My heart was broken. Even if it meant going bankrupt, she was prepared to sacrifice everything for Michael. She yelled at me when I proposed that Michael take the bus to travel about, claiming that it wasn't safe for him. Family supports family. She said that as if I were the one who was being irrational. I had given up attempting to reason with her by now. She would always find a way to justify everything Michael did, so I concentrated on myself. I saved as much money as I could, put in extra hours at my part-time job, and worked hard for school. My goal was to attend college, earn a degree, and then ultimately relocate far from my family's turmoil. My getaway was working at the bakery. Mrs. Chun, my employer, was a welcome change. I wasn't used to being treated with love and respect at home, but she did. She shared all of her baking expertise with me and even inspired me to consider starting my own bakery in the future. Having someone believe in me felt fantastic. Naturally, Mom was too preoccupied with Michael to be aware of this. Michael needed her for a little stomach problem, so she missed my high school graduation. She made no attempt to apologize. My classmates and their families were all around me as I sat there in my cap and gown, feeling totally isolated. But then Mrs. Chun appeared. She even took me out for ice cream after bringing me flowers. It meant a lot to me, but it wasn't the same as having my mother there. Meanwhile, Michael continued to plummet. He was often borrowing money from his mother and was only able to hold down a job for a few weeks at a time. She would gripe to me about it, occasionally mentioning how difficult it was to meet his expectations. However, she would silence me the moment I proposed to interrupt him. "You're not understanding," she would say. He's having trouble. He needs our assistance. And it wasn't just money. Mom was exhausted because of Michael. Since he had lost his license, she had been his driver. Because it conflicted with Michael's schedule, she even resigned her work. She simply shrugged and said, "We'll figure it out," when I asked how she intended to pay the bills. It was frustrating. She was so mired in denial that she was blind to the harm she was causing to both me and herself. I made one attempt to contact Michael in the hopes of reaching him. I informed him that he couldn't continue to rely on his mother indefinitely and that he needed to take charge of his life. In my face, he chuckled. "What matters to you?" "Oh," he said, "Mom doesn't mind. Furthermore, you're not really accomplishing anything significant." Although his remarks were painful, they were expected. Mom had always allowed Michael's selfishness to continue. I started applying to colleges, and that was the tipping moment. After putting forth a lot of effort to save funds and get scholarships, I was at last prepared to go on in the hopes that she would be proud of me instead. I sat down with my mother to discuss my goals. Her eyes seldom left her phone. She responded, "That's nice, honey. However, Michael needs my assistance in getting ready for his interview tomorrow." The final straw was that. That's when I knew I couldn't count on my mother. Nor encouragement, nor support. Not even simple recognition. I worked really hard to pay for classes, part-time employment, and the occasional freelance contract after I was accepted to a fantastic institution. I was able to cover all of the costs myself. My mother also did not attend my college graduation. She said that because Michael had a job interview, she was unable to leave him. But then Mrs. Chun appeared. I even received a tiny gift from her. My name is stitched on a personalized apron. It was among the kindest things I had ever received from someone. I prayed that my mother would wake up and realize what Michael was doing to her. Not only was he stealing her money, he was stealing her life, her time, her energy. But that was not how she saw it. She still saw Michael as the little child in need of her care, and I was the one who was powerful and self-sufficient. In hindsight, I believe that was the most painful thing. It was more than simply Mom's preference for Michael. It was that I was completely invisible to her. Her daughter wasn't me. I was her fallback option. When Michael wasn't there, she went to this individual. Although it was a solitary upbringing, it taught me how to take care of myself, and I'm thankful for it. I began to feel as though things were really coming together after graduation. I obtained my own apartment, a respectable job, and started saving for my dream profession, opening a bakery. Although it wasn't simple, I was pleased with my accomplishment. At this time, I had low expectations for both Mom and Michael. I had already come to terms with the fact that they would not support me or celebrate my victories. I didn't anticipate what happened next, though. It was sad when Grandma died. My rock had always been her, the only family member that truly cared about me. It was like losing the last of my stability when I lost her. However, Grandma managed to help me even after she passed away. In her will, she gave me $50,000 expressly for my ambition of owning a bakery. It offered me hope, but it was bittersweet. At last, I could begin pursuing something that was really mine. I spent the first several months following Grandma's passing concentrating on making plans. I conducted site research, investigated possible suppliers, and collaborated with Mrs. Chun to prepare a business plan. However, as time went on, I discovered that the funds had not been sent to my account. I initially believed it to be merely a holdup in the estate procedure. Everything fell apart when I phoned the attorney managing Grandma's estate to inquire about the situation. I was informed by the attorney that the money had already been claimed. Mom had picked it up and claimed to be handling it for me. My heart fell. I was aware that something was amiss. Mom hadn't brought up the subject of money. I also got a bad feeling about where it had gone because of her past with Michael. I confronted my mother at her home that evening. She started behaving cagey as soon as she saw me, seeming astonished. I mentioned the inheritance at that point. She fidgeted with the hem of her shirt and added, "Oh, I was going to tell you. Simply put, Michael has kept me quite occupied." "You are aware of the situation?" I forced her to answer the question. "Mom, where's the money?" Trying to speak steadily, I asked. She muttered something about utilizing part of it while avoiding my gaze. She eventually broke down when I pressed her. crying and admitting that she had handed Michael $45,000 of my inheritance. I was taken aback. As she attempted to explain, my mind was racing. Michael required it. As though that explained everything, she said. He wants to build a trucking company and regain his license. He has a fantastic opportunity. When you're older, you'll comprehend. That money wasn't for Michael, Mom, I responded, raising my voice. It was for my bakery. There's a reason Grandma left it to me. She seemed unconcerned. With a dismissive sweep of her hand, she continued, You can start small with the remaining $5,000. That's how a lot of businesses begin. It will come to you. You're intelligent. What I was hearing was unbelievable. It was the result of years of anguish and anger. I told you that you had no right to touch that money. Grandma put her confidence in me, not in you. Are you even aware of your actions? When I brought up Grandma's cautions about enabling Michael, she responded by crying even more and accusing me of being unkind. In between sobbing, she added, You're just jealous. Michael's life has been more difficult than yours. You have no idea what it's like to go through what he does. Michael entered before I could finish speaking. He dared to suggest that I was the issue. Why are you shouting at your mother? He scoffed. She's experienced enough. He chuckled when I informed him he couldn't keep the money. Oh, hurry up, he said. You were always Grandma's favorite. For once, I believe it's fair that I receive anything. That was it. I was finished. I informed both of them. I was removing them from my existence. Don't give me a call. Please refrain from texting me. Please don't come to my flat. I'm finished. I didn't care when Mom began to cry and declare that I was hurting her heart. Michael grinned as if he anticipated my inevitable resurgence. I removed them from my social media accounts and banned their numbers as soon as I came home. It was a start, but I knew it wouldn't stop them. I was prioritizing myself for the first time in my life. They obviously didn't respect my boundaries, though. They were arriving at my place of employment in a matter of days. My mother first begged me to talk to her while sobbing while she sat in the parking lot during my lunch breaks. Michael then chimed in, accusing me of being self-centered for leaving the family. It became a common joke in the office as my co-workers began to notice. They would remark, Your family is back, as though it were a sitcom. It was embarrassing. When Michael attempted to follow me into the workplace one morning, things became heated. Security had to intervene because of how loudly he was shouting. Despite being barred from the land, he and his mother continued to do so. Mom began sending me emails from several accounts, begging me to change my mind. She even sent my manager an email, which led to HR issues. I felt ashamed. The Facebook postings followed. In a lengthy tirade, my Uncle Mike said that I was destroying the family. In addition to showing me old family pictures, he called me a cold-hearted daughter who abandoned her mother. My cousins added that I was ungrateful and self-centered. They all don't seem to care about what Michael and Mom did. They all refused to give the money back. All they wanted was for me to forget and forgive, as usual. It was difficult for me to ignore it. I could see guilt baiting me into making amends with Mom and Michael wherever I looked. I felt as though their expectations were suffocating me. It wasn't as easy as I thought to stop talking to Mom and Michael. I assumed that avoiding them and restricting their numbers would be sufficient. However, they made it their goal to ensnare me in their mess again. Things quickly became heated, and before I knew it, their efforts to get back in touch had affected both my personal and professional lives. Initially, my mother would just show up at work and wait in the parking lot while I was taking lunch. In the hopes that I would come out and speak with her, she would cry in her car. I paid her no attention. Then Michael began to follow behind, shouting at me in the mornings as he stood by my car about how self-centered I was for leaving the family. My coworkers would notice when I walked right by him, acting as though I didn't hear. My boss drew me aside one day. Are things going well at home? It was obvious that she was uneasy when she inquired. We have observed. It looks like your family is here quite a bit. It was embarrassing. I said that it wouldn't affect my job and muttered something about a family dispute. In actuality, though, it had already. My dynamic family was the subject of rumor, and I felt helpless to stop it. When Michael attempted to follow me into the office, it was the last straw. People on the second floor could hear him shouting so loudly. While Mom stood outside crying and told everyone that I was breaking her heart, security had to intervene and escort him away. Security then forbade them both from entering the building. That should be the end of it, I thought. Mom, however, discovered a different method to get involved in my life. She began sending me emails from other accounts, begging me to change my mind. When that failed, she sent my manager an email informing them that I was experiencing emotional instability and requesting their understanding. HR intervened and threatened to terminate my employment if the emails continued. Mom wasn't the only one who tried to shame me into forgiving them, but I was still embarrassed. Mike, my uncle, made the decision to make it a public event. He accused me of being a callous daughter and destroying the family in a lengthy tirade that he shared on Facebook, along with old family pictures. My cousins added that I was ungrateful and self-centered. It was like being ambushed. They all don't seem to care about what Michael and Mom did. Even if it meant compromising my happiness, they only wanted me to maintain harmony. In spite of everything, I was not going to give up. No one else appeared to agree with me, but I knew I was right. Then I happened to run into Olivia, Michael's ex, in the grocery store one weekend. She immediately recognized me, even though we hadn't spoken in years. She brought up Michael and inquired as to if he was still causing trouble after some light conversation. She started giggling when I told her about the inheritance and his alleged trucking company. "Do you own a trucking company?" She shook her head as she said, "Michael has no ambitions to start a business. He has more than a year of gaming experience. He owes a whopping $40,000. I went cold. What are you discussing? According to Mom, he needed the funds to launch the firm and regain his license. Olivia took her phone out and looked through her previous texts. "This is something you must see," she added, displaying to me Michael's boastful texts in which he claimed to have persuaded his mother to grant him the fortune. He chuckled at how simple it was to persuade Mom to give me the money, and called me foolish for believing the trucking story. It was like receiving a kick to the stomach when reading such sentences. He made fun of me, Grandma, and even said that his mother always chose him over me. One message was particularly clear: "She's really stupid. Grandma ought to have let me handle everything." Olivia continued to browse, providing me with more evidence. With a new sob story for each borrower, Michael had borrowed money from dozens of individuals. He informed Mr. Wilson, our elderly neighbor, that he needed $5,000 to cover his medical expenses. He persuaded a relative to lend him $3,000 to start an auto repair company. He immediately used every dime he received for gaming. Equipped with this proof, I spent that night at my mother's place. At first, she attempted to seem foolish by claiming Olivia was only resentful and trying to harm Michael. She eventually acknowledged the truth, though, after I showed her the texts. She said that Michael had been threatened by the loan sharks and that she felt compelled to assist him. That money was not yours to handle. My voice trembled as I screamed. I got it from Grandma. She put her confidence in me. Mom's reaction was enraged, as if it explained everything. She replied, "I couldn't allow them to harm Michael. I couldn't let the house go. You're still young. You can resave money." "Then why didn't you sell your home?" I fired back. "How about getting a loan? Why am I constantly the victim of Michael's mess?" She had nothing to say. She sidestepped the question instead, accusing me of being ungrateful and self-centered. With tears running down her cheeks, she continued, "I did what any mother would do. When you have children of your own, you'll comprehend. I didn't purchase it, though. It wasn't me that Mom had chosen. I never did it." Grandma's attorney called me the next day. While going over the estate records, he found that my mother had falsified my signature on a number of them in order to obtain the inheritance. He inquired if I wanted to file charges and stated that he was required by law to disclose the forgery. I was feeling ill and accusing my own mother. Even though it was unimaginable, I couldn't let her get away with it. The money was no longer the only consideration. It had to do with defending myself. I advised the lawyer to proceed after years of neglect and abuse. Mom called me crying and in a panic when she learned. She pleaded with me not to file a complaint, claiming that she had just done it to keep Michael safe. If I didn't help him, he threatened to leave. She cried. He threatened to cut me off by moving across the nation. With her, it was always the same tale. At all costs, Michael's needs came first. However, I wasn't going to back down this time. I was taking a stand for once. I had not anticipated the consequences of filing accusations against Mom. As soon as word got out, practically everyone on Mom's side of the family turned against me. Leading the assault was my Uncle Mike, who called me a shameful daughter and blasted me on Facebook. He accused me of attempting to put my mother out of a house and that I was ruining my family for financial gain. In our little town, his article went viral, and all of a sudden, distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were sharing their thoughts. "Water is not as thick as blood," a relative of mine wrote. "How could you harm your own mother in this way? She has never shown gratitude." Another was added, "A true daughter would be able to forgive her mother. It wasn't easy, but I tried not to let it affect me." These folks didn't care to comprehend and had no concept what I had gone through. Mom had stolen money, and none of them offered to help replace it. Furthermore, none of them made Michael answerable for what he did. All they wanted was for me to ignore it and act as though nothing was wrong. But Dad's side of the family supported me. They were aware of Michael's character and the harm that had been done over the years by Mom's partiality. Almost every day my aunt called to see how I was doing, and some family members even contributed a modest sum to assist me start saving for my bakery once more. Their support meant the world to me, even if it wasn't much. Michael, meantime, was having problems. Regarding his gambling debts and the money he had defrauded her of, Olivia had reported him, and he was being investigated for fraud by the police. As it happened, he had been scheming to defraud those who trusted him for years. The extent of his deceit was astounding. More than $120,000 was pilfered from neighbors, acquaintances, and even churchgoers. He had Mr. Thompson as one of his victims. Our senior neighbor. Michael said he required surgery and had stolen $5,000 from him. Another was the Adams, a retired church couple who donated $25,000 to Michael. He got government contracts to rehabilitate low-income dwellings after persuading them. He even defrauded Miss Thompson, his former high school teacher, of $15,000 for a fictitious food truck company. Some of these frauds had been covered up by Mom, who paid off victims and wrote letters of apologies to keep them silent. I had an odd mixture of relief and despair when Michael was taken into custody by the police. Even though he had harmed a lot of people, I still had memories of the brother I grew up with and looked up to before my mother's partiality ruined everything. Although Michael had always been self-centered, his mother's unrelenting support had made him a monster. Next was Mom's case. It was overwhelming evidence against her. The bank records were truthful, and handwriting specialists verified that she had falsified my signature to obtain the bequest. Her attorney contacted me and offered to sell her house and pay me back in modest amounts, but I turned him down. The money was no longer the only consideration. It was about defending myself and making her answer for years of abandonment and deceit. It hurt to sit through the trial. When Mom took the witness, she appeared weak and worn out, and her attorney portrayed her as a desperate mother who had acted out of love for her kid. But her emotions were overshadowed by the proof. Even after she was sentenced by the judge, Mom wouldn't accept responsibility. She gave me a beseeching expression, as though she thought I would forgive her. For the final time. I didn't. I packed up and relocated to a new city following the trial. I discovered a tiny flat. I started rebuilding after landing a position at an accounting business. I kept my whereabouts a secret from my relatives. I was resolved to shield myself from more meddling. I felt free for the first time in my life. However, the tranquility was short-lived. Mom started phoning me from various lines, pleading with me to send the judge a letter requesting Michael's mercy. She maintained that he had learned his lesson and didn't deserve to go to jail. Even other people from our former church contacted me to suggest that I should forgive my mother since she merely behaved out of love. I paid them all no attention. I was determined to stop prioritizing their needs before my own, something I had done all my life. First was Michael's trial. People he had defrauded filled the courtroom, each of them describing the impact his falsehoods had on their lives. While some talked angrily about the financial and emotional damage he had caused, others sobbed, feeling guilty for having trusted him. Michael was unable to use charm to get out of trouble for the first time. I didn't care that he didn't look at me the entire time. I was quite relieved when the court sentenced him to prison time. At last he was having to deal with the fallout from his actions. Soon after came Mom's case. She appeared to be a shadow of the lady who had previously provided stability for our family. Her attorney attempted to win compassion, however poorly. However, the proof was indisputable. She attempted to directly address me in her final remarks, claiming that she had merely taken the necessary precautions to keep her child safe. However, I saw right through it. She didn't behave out of love. They have to do with control. She was given community service and probation by the judge. It was sufficient, even if it wasn't the resolution I was hoping for. I noticed that I felt lighter in the months that followed. Freer, not burdened by Mom and Michael's turmoil all the time. At last, I could concentrate on myself. I maintained ties with my father's side of the family, whose unobtrusive assistance had been invaluable. They reminded me that I deserved happiness and urged me to continue chasing my ambition of working in a bakery. My new city has been a nice place to live. I've established a routine, acquired new acquaintances, and resumed saving for my bakery.